Amazing transformation, Black CEO's seat stolen by passenger. Discover what happened next. Marcus stepped into the airport lounge, his heart swelling with pride. He had just been named CEO of a promising tech startup, a feat that felt monumental for a kid who grew up in a single-parent household in Atlanta. The vibrant hum of families gathering, students rushing, and business professionals networking created an atmosphere thick with potential. Yet, beneath his pride lurked a gnawing anxiety about the pivotal business trip ahead. Details of meetings filled his mind. He reached for the first-class boarding pass in his pocket, a tangible reminder that hard work finally bore fruit. His moment of euphoria dissipated as a loud passenger barreled into him, slinging his bag into Marcus's side like a sidekick. The man, tall and imposing, brushed past Marcus without a second glance, claiming the very seat Marcus had reserved for himself. A flicker of disbelief flashed through Marcus. Instinctively, Marcus's posture straightened, fueled by the harsh reality of being brushed aside, a familiar sting that echoed memories of countless instances where he felt unseen or dismissed. People around him began to notice, their eyes flickering between him and the boisterous passenger who now lounged in his seat. He wanted to shout, to reclaim his space. Instead, doubt festered in his throat. Would anyone stand with him? Would they validate the righteous anger building within him? As mission statements and projections ran through his mind, this confrontation began to morph into something larger, a fight for respect that resonated deeper than a simple stolen seat. He hesitated, the passenger's irritable chuckle slicing through the air like a knife. The knowledge that this man flaunted privilege weighed heavily on Marcus. The burden of his mother's lessons filled his mind. Respect and hard work were the essence of a successful life, but oftentimes seemed unrecognized in a world that judged based on skin color and status. As a business leader, he thrived in boardrooms, but this moment warranted a different kind of confrontation. Before Marcus could take a step toward the man's seat, an airline attendant's voice broke through the thick air of tension. "Excuse me, sir," she approached the passenger, yet the hope coursing through Marcus felt fragile. Even as she began speaking, murmurs filled the lounge, conversations revolving around entitlement and power, directed and amplifying the societal prejudices that always loomed in his periphery. He could feel the invisible noose tightening around him. His family's struggles flashed before his eyes, the late-night study sessions, the sacrifices made by his mother, the reminders to never settle for less. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." "Now let's continue." The attendant concluded her intervention, but the doubt lingered. Would her voice resonate louder than the passenger's influence? Just as he gathered the courage to step forward, the tension coiling tighter within him, fragments of memories flared, his mother's laughter and fierce eyes, relentless encouragement pushing against the weight of a world that sometimes forgot he existed. Marcus stood frozen, the walls of the lounge closing in on him. Would he find the strength to confront the entitled man, or would this be yet another moment where he simply became another face in the crowd? The flurry of emotions threatened to spiral out of control. That question of identity and respect hung heavy, the air thick with unresolved tension. The stage was set, but whether he would embrace it or retreat remained shrouded in uncertainty, the very fight for respect looming larger than he ever anticipated. At that moment, a rush of adrenaline surged through Marcus. The aching doubt that had anchored him began to crack, revealing something fiercer below the surface. He thought about his mother's relentless drive and the countless sacrifices she had made. Her voice echoed in his head, urging him to stand tall, to demand respect. He shifted his weight forward, drawing a steadying breath, and in doing so, he felt a clarity emerge from the chaos. He remembered that being a CEO wasn't just about the corner office and the contracts. It was about asserting himself, claiming his space in every aspect, especially in a moment like this. Marcus took a step towards the imposing figure sprawled in his seat. Each stride resonated with a purpose that transcended mere frustration. He was no longer just a man defending a stolen position, he was a representative of countless others striving to break barriers. Anger intertwined with empowerment, and he felt alive with every breath. The attendant paused as she noticed Marcus approaching. "Sir, I believe this seat is taken," she stated assertively, and the air shifted slightly. People began to murmur again, the energy in the lounge pulsing with a mix of anticipation and unease. The tall passenger glanced over, surprise flickering across his face. He scoffed, "And what? You think you own this seat?" His dismissive tone sent a wave of indignation rippling through Marcus, but instead of retreating, Marcus allowed the insult to fuel him. "I didn't claim it based on mere entitlement," said Marcus, his voice steady and clear. "I worked hard for this. I've overcome a lot to even be here, in this position. All I ask is that you respect that." With each word, he felt a weight lift, his confidence hardening like armor. The room seemed to hold its breath. Eyes remained locked on the exchange, their tension vibrating through the air. For the first time, Marcus felt the collective energy behind him, a silent acknowledgement of his struggle shared within the transient community of the lounge. He was not just fighting for a seat, he was fighting against the trivialization of his hard-earned identity. The passenger's demeanor shifted, his bravado faltering as he realized the gravity of Marcus's assertion. "Fine," he relented, grumbling as he rose to relinquish the chair. A murmur of approval rippled through the nearby onlookers, and Marcus felt a burgeoning sense of vindication wash over him. He sat down, finally claiming his place. As he settled into the plush chair, a warmth spread within, mingling with the lingering adrenaline. He glanced towards the attendant, who wore a look of respect and understanding. This wasn't merely an act of reclaiming a seat, it was a manifestation of his journey, a testament to his resilience. In that moment, he knew that he wasn't just stepping into a new role as a CEO, he was redefining his narrative in the professional world. The confidence growing inside him started to illuminate the path ahead. He understood that these moments, the confrontations that pushed him to the edge, were essential catalysts igniting his drive for success. As he prepared for the upcoming meetings, Marcus considered how moments of vulnerability could spark change not just for himself but for others watching. He contemplated turning this incident into a lesson for his followers back home, using it to empower and inspire the next generation of leaders who felt invisible in a world rife with obstacles. The flight announcement crackled through the lounge, breaking his reverie. Seconds later, his phone pinged a text from one of his investors eagerly anticipating their discussion. It was a reminder that now, more than ever, he needed to embody the strength he was uncovering. But as he rose to board, a sharp realization cut through the excitement: this was just the beginning. Confrontations like this would not be the exception but rather an expectation in his journey as a leader. He braced himself, ready to face the challenges ahead but aware that self-discovery came with its own burdens. Yet compelling questions loomed: could he sustain this newfound strength? Would he remain true to himself amid relentless challenges? As he navigated past the towering shadows of uncertainty, the next steps awaited, urging him to answer the most pressing dilemma of all: who did he truly want to become as a leader in a demanding world? As Marcus stepped onto the plane, he felt the electric hum of his recent confrontation still coursing through him. The seatbelt sign flickered on above, and he was struck by the need for a deep breath. He focused on the sensation of the fabric of the seat beneath him, grounding himself in the physical while the whirlwind of thoughts cascaded through his mind. He couldn't shake the realization that claiming that seat had been more than just a petty act of defiance, it had drawn an invisible line in the sand. What other lines might he need to draw in the months ahead? As the plane began its ascent, he could almost hear his mother's voice again reminding him to assert his place with dignity and to lead with intention, whatever the outcome. Returning to his role of CEO meant more than just managing numbers and leading meetings. It was an intricate performance crafted from countless layers of self-awareness. Yet for every ounce of confidence he found, another whisper of doubt pulsed beneath the fear of being judged, of being criticized, of falling prey to the expectations and prejudices that clung to the corporate world like a mist. He pulled out his laptop and began going over the agenda for the upcoming meetings. Investors were eager to discuss the potential shifts in the market, and amidst the financial projections, Marcus resolved to weave in a narrative rooted in his recent experiences. He wanted to share the transformative power of standing firm against obstacles, not just for himself but for the budding leaders who looked up to him. He thought about how leadership demanded more than a title; it required authenticity and the courage to confront adversity head-on. He wondered if his journey could serve as a springboard for what leadership might look like in a transformed landscape, one where no one felt compelled to shrink into the shadows of another's authority. As he typed out a few preliminary notes, a message from his assistant popped up on the screen. A scheduling error had left a void in his calendar, an unexpected gap where a critical stakeholder meeting was supposed to occur. It was an inconvenience that could easily escalate into a missed opportunity. Marcus's heart raced. He had a choice to make. Should he let it slide, shifting his focus elsewhere, or confront the disruption head-on, reshaping the narrative that could arise from such chaos? He knew he had to act decisively, yet a part of him hesitated, fearing the judgment that could come from making too bold a move. He looked out the window, watching the clouds blur past like fleeting moments. This was about more than just personal development. A choice loomed larger: how to embrace the power of leadership without repeating the cycles of self-doubt that had long plagued him. Were these opportunities to pivot exactly what he needed to reinforce his resolve? As his thoughts tumbled in a free-fall of determination, Marcus made the decision. He would request an impromptu video call with the stakeholder. "Let us embrace the chaos," he muttered under his breath, invigorated by the challenge. He secured the call, knowing full well that this bold maneuver would leave an impression, one that could solidify his stance in their eyes. As he prepared, a swell of anticipation mixed with anxiety twisted in his stomach. It was another step into the unknown, testing the mettle he had just begun to forge. Just as the plane hit cruising altitude, a notification jolted him from his focus. An article headline flashed across his screen: CEO Confrontation Sparks Debate on Workplace Respect. It was about him, and as he clicked to read, a new wave of pressure enveloped him. Caught in the moment, Marcus wondered if this moment of unexpected visibility would challenge him in ways he hadn't anticipated. The eyes of the corporate world were fixed on him now. Would he rise, or would he falter under the weight of expectation? With a determined breath, he realized that the narrative was shifting, but the challenge lay in how he would respond. He had set his course for authenticity, but the next storm was already brewing, ready to test the very essence of who he aimed to become. And as the clouds dispersed outside, Marcus silently questioned the path ahead. Was he truly ready to face the complexities of leadership amidst scrutiny, or would he become undone by the very judgments he sought to transcend? The screen flickered with the headline, and Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Several thoughts raced through his mind. This was supposed to be a moment of newfound assertiveness, yet here he stood on the precipice of public scrutiny, thrust into a narrative that he hadn't crafted. He closed the laptop, the click echoing in his mind like a final judgment. There was a diverging path before him. He could allow the critics to navigate the story, or he could take the reins and reshape the discourse. Introspection wormed its way through him, igniting an urge to share his experience in his words, not the media's. What would my mother say? He pondered. She would urge him to use this as a platform for change, an opportunity to voice what true leadership entailed. He steeled himself. The upcoming video call wasn't merely an obligation, it was a chance to articulate his vision, to strike a chord. But the fear lurked just beneath the surface, the fear of not being taken seriously, of being labeled as merely another overreacting CEO. He had no space for that mindset. Instead, he focused on how to funnel this anxiety into strength, tightening his grip on the metaphorical wheel. As the plane soared higher, so too did his resolve. He began drafting an outline in his mind, dissecting points that needed clarity. Authenticity, courage, responsibility, these would be his anchors. But will those words resonate? Would they land with power? He envisioned how to present his thoughts, casting aside pretense and opting for transparency. People connected to vulnerability, the stakes were higher when there was skin in the game. This wasn't merely about convincing investors of sound decisions, it was about establishing a foundation of trust amidst uncertainty. The prospect of the call sent a ripple of adrenaline through him, competing with the anxiety that threatened to hamper his thoughts. He recalled past meetings where he had faltered under the weight of expectations, retreating into familiar patterns of self-doubt. Each time, he had watched the opportunity slip through his fingers, like grains of sand on a gentle breeze. Not this time. His fingers drummed against the armrests, a moment of impulsive resolve igniting within him. He pledged to take every comment that shadowed him in stride, to transform the spotlight into a canvas for his leadership story. In those flashes of introspection, he recognized a newfound clarity. This chaos was an invitation to define what he stood for. Not just in words, but in action. As the flight attendant glided past, Marcus requested a glass of water. Sipping it provided a moment of clarity, washing away the remnants of doubt. With each sip, he mentally rehearsed his talking points. He imagined the stakeholders moving forward, the click of their muted responses dangling like uncharted territory ahead. Part anticipation, part fear. The video call loomed closer, and Marcus felt a sudden wave of vulnerability crash over him. What if they misjudged him? Yet along with the fear, determination surged. There was liberation in exposing his truths, in offering a narrative that wasn't shrouded by another's perception. Finally, as the plane's vibrations settled into a steady hum, he wrapped himself in the idea of redefining conflict as a catalyst for visionary leadership. This would not just about silencing distractions but claiming narratives to empower others. As he tightened his resolve, a final thought struck him: what if this was not about fear at all but an opportunity to forge deeper connections? Would he rise to the occasion or remain shackled to expectation? A notification blinked on his screen. His assistant had just sent over the stakeholders' comments from previous calls. They hinted at concern over extensive hiring strategies, and a question loomed: was he ready to navigate that conversation with integrity? He took a deep breath, the taste of water still lingering, the pressure of the call ready to ignite the fire within. The storm of judgment met the potential for clarity, a crucial moment sat on the horizon. But would he be courageous enough to allow the conversation to extend beyond defense and push towards a transformative collaboration? Marcus adjusted the collar of his shirt, a trace of sweat forming at the nape of his neck as he prepared for the call. The corporate environment buzzed to life around him, yet he existed in a bubble of focus. His laptop screen illuminated his face, reflecting a tense mixture of hope and trepidation. The faces of stakeholders would soon populate his screen, faces that bore the weight of expectations and skepticism. As the call connected, Marcus practiced a fine balance between composure and authenticity, his heart pounding lightly against the confines of his chest. The opening pleasantries felt hollow. Small talk was a flimsy facade that often faded into unspoken judgments. Each smile from a colleague felt laden with unexpressed thoughts about his recent headlines. He could feel it hung in the air like a charged atmosphere right before a storm. "Good morning, everyone," he began, formulating his thoughts under the pressure of their eager eyes. "I know the recent conversations have raised concerns regarding our strategic direction, particularly in our hiring process. Every word mattered, every tone scrutinized." He had practiced this moment an infinite number of times, yet presenting it live felt like stepping onto a tightrope. He could see a few skeptical brows arching, and it compelled him to dig deeper. He had to invite them into his narrative, to ensure they understood the context behind his leadership decisions, the motives that had, until now, been lost in translation. "Before diving into numbers, I want to emphasize that these decisions weren't made on a whim. They come from a place of understanding our market and, frankly, our past shortcomings. We've been playing it safe while the world moves around us. It's time to redefine success and make bold moves," he added, feeling a swell of energy reinforce his words. But vulnerability clawed at him, gnawing at the edges of his confidence. What if they perceived this as desperation, a defensive tactic in the face of criticism? Although deep in his gut, a belief churned. Authenticity leads to connection, he reminded himself as he cast his eyes into the screen. He reported some key metrics, aligned them with foreseeable trends, and as the digital clock ticked, Marcus felt a subtle shift. It was the moment of clarity he had both anticipated and feared. This wasn't just a presentation, this was a conversation. The atmosphere had softened slightly, the skepticism replaced by curiosity. The fear of failure can paralyze us, he continued, redirecting the narrative. But what I learned is that transparency invokes trust. I want each of you to know that we are not just figures on a balance sheet. Each decision carries weight because they shape lives, both our employees and our clients. He took a breath, eyes scanning the faces of his colleagues. They were absorbing his words, and a few nods emerged, tentative yet hopeful. Perhaps there was a budding connection forming, a thread that could weave into something stronger than pure business. As the conversation progressed, Marcus instinctively noticed how open dialogue shifted the gathering's tone. Questions arose, not out of skepticism but a genuine interest in exploring solutions together. No longer were they filling a silent agenda, this was an exchange, a collaborative effort. He saw it. His willingness to expose his own uncertainties had encouraged them to do the same. Together, he concluded, we can navigate these changes. If we stand firm in our values, lead with courage, and acknowledge our missteps, our potential is boundless. Ending the call left a lingering electricity in the air. There was hope that the shadows casting doubt had receded, if only for a little while. Yet, as he stared blankly at the now blank screen, Marcus felt a gnawing unease. Was he merely observing a temporary change? What if the same doubts loomed large as soon as he left the realm of pixels and phone lines? It sparked a newfound determination within him. The need to sustain this transformative energy was apparent. As he composed himself to leave the conference room, a notification chimed from his phone, another headline spinning in chaos. CEO under fire for hiring strategy, stakeholders demand accountability. He paused, struck not just by the backlash but a question that clawed at the edge of his conscience. Would he truly face the impending storm, armed with the authenticity he had just begun to embody? The path to true leadership beckoned, a crucible of trials and revelations. The challenge lay ahead, but one thing was certain: he could no longer sidestep the reality of his role. Would he confront the critics, or hide behind the facade of corporate decorum? In the yet dark horizon of uncertainty, he felt an undeniable pull toward the next decisive moment, one that would require him to confront not just external opinions, but the very essence of what leadership meant to him. Marcus stepped into the hallway, letting the door close behind him, a faint reminder of the weight he had just lifted from his shoulders. The echoes of the call lingered in his mind: hope, skepticism, curiosity, a whirlwind of emotions that threatened to unravel his newfound momentum. A sharp bell tone emanated from his phone, dragging him from his thoughts. He glanced down, heart sinking at the headline from the notification. CEO under fire for hiring strategy, stakeholders demand accountability. The words screamed at him, as if challenging his resolve. Had he merely shifted the conversation without addressing the root of the problem? He could almost feel the tension tightening around him. Taking a deep breath, Marcus leaned against the wall, allowing the bustling office life to fade into the background. He had taken a step forward, but would it lead to genuine change, or was it only a fleeting moment of clarity? Doubt splintered his confidence like cracks spreading across ice. The decisions that loomed ahead required more than platitudes or temporary change. He needed a firm strategy, something that stemmed from deeper introspection. What did his leadership truly represent? He had spoken of vulnerability, but now he questioned whether he was prepared to embody it fully. Focusing on his surroundings, Marcus noted the ebb and flow of his colleagues, their conversations a mixture of laughter and productivity. Yet, the atmosphere around his office felt dense, as if the walls themselves bore witness to the judgments swirling outside his reach. He had opened the door to dialogue, yet how effectively could he maintain that momentum? A flicker of inspiration sparked in his mind. He recalled his own journey. There had been times when he felt out of place, not just as a leader but as a person in this vast corporate ecosystem. He hadn't fought tooth and nail for this role only to retreat into doubt. Vulnerability had instigated a conversation, but now he needed to establish a plan that could sustain that connection. Marcus pushed himself away from the wall and walked toward his office. He would not let this moment slip away like water through his fingers. The notion of writing a personal letter to the entire company began to take shape in his mind. He envisioned it as a manifesto, a reaffirmation of his values, commitment to transparency, and a call to action for all employees to engage in the narrative of their growth as a team. As he sat at his desk, the keys felt unusually welcoming beneath his fingers. He simmered in the possibility of this initiative, noting how it could act as a bridge for those grappling with their insecurities, much like he had once done. This could solidify a culture where every voice mattered. It wouldn't just shift perceptions, it would embolden collective creativity. Yet, another wave of apprehension crashed over him. What if this effort showcased a vulnerable side that was deemed unacceptable in the fierce corporate world? What if he risked isolating himself, exposing fears others wished to conceal? Every time he put himself out there, it felt like reconvening a fight whose outcome lay precarious. Mind racing, Marcus set aside his fears and dove into the process. Each word represented a piece of himself, a gamble that could either resonate or fail spectacularly. If he sought to inspire, he would have to exemplify this through his actions. He began with a heartfelt introduction, acknowledging the doubts many faced while navigating a rapidly evolving workplace. Hours slipped away, and the letter morphed into a compelling account of both his challenges and triumphs. With every sentence, Marcus felt a shift within himself. He was no longer an outsider unsure of his environment. He was becoming the architect of change, crafting a narrative steeped in authenticity. Sunny rays filtered through his office blinds as Marcus read over the finished draft one last time. He was ready to confront the storm head-on, using transparency as his shield. Right before hitting send, a sudden urge held him back. He needed to consult an ally, someone who understood the complexities of leadership and could ensure his message resonated while retaining clarity. He opened his contact list, scrolling through names until he landed on Amelia, the bold head of HR who had long inspired him with her unyielding commitment to empathetic leadership. Texting her to meet, Marcus felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with anxiety. Amelia would challenge him, no doubt, but perhaps that was precisely what he needed. The path had just begun to reveal itself, one intricately laced with the promise of transformation, yet the final destination remained shrouded in uncertainty. As he waited, a fleeting thought entered his mind, a voice whispering in the depths of his doubt. Would confronting his vulnerabilities forge a path to empowerment, or would it merely expose him to greater scrutiny? The creaking sound of the approaching footsteps resounded louder within his heart, setting the stage for a pivotal discussion that would determine not just the company's direction, but his own legacy as a leader. The sound of footsteps grew closer until Amelia appeared in the doorway, her expression a blend of curiosity and understanding. Marcus gestured her in, aware of how much he needed her perspective, yet uncertain of what they would uncover during their conversation. "Hey, Marcus," she said, closing the door behind her with an intentional finality that seemed to amplify the gravity of the discussion. "I got your message. What's up?" He waved his hand toward the chair opposite his desk, then hesitated before speaking, grappling with the realization that this moment could either solidify or fracture his burgeoning vision. "I've been working on something I think could be pivotal for the team," he started, his voice laced with both excitement and trepidation. "A letter to the entire company. I want to share my experiences and urge them to embrace a culture of transparency and vulnerability." Amelia raised an eyebrow, an expression of measured skepticism flickering across her face. "That sounds great, but you're aware of the risks, right? Leaders don't often bask in vulnerability. It's not a commonly accepted trait in our environment. What makes you think it will resonate?" Her words stirred a tempest of thoughts within Marcus. He had anticipated this challenge, the probing questioning that would demand he defend himself. "I know that," he conceded, his fingers tapping on the desk nervously. "That's exactly why I have to do it. We're stuck in a cycle of superficiality. People are afraid to show their true selves. If I can be honest, maybe they'll feel encouraged to do the same." "Encouraged, yes," Amelia said, smoothing her hair back, "but you must contemplate the consequences. What if this doesn't just expose vulnerability, but rather invites criticism and suspicion? You're the CEO, your decisions shape the company culture. This could open you up to attacks from those who see vulnerability as a weakness." The mention of attacks made Marcus flinch. He had envisioned inspiring a movement of empowerment, and yet there lurked the shadow of ridicule. The prospect of undermining his authority was unsettling. Still, as he looked into Amelia's eyes, he felt a flicker of resolve ignite within him. "I've felt this isolation before. If I can be a source of connection, something genuine in this corporate theater, isn't it worth the risk?" A soft smile crossed her lips, suggesting an approval he hadn't anticipated. "You speak from your heart, and that's compelling. But have you considered how to navigate backlash if it comes? How will you respond to dissenting voices, especially those questioning your credibility?" The weight of her inquiry pressed against him, and Marcus could almost see the walls of his own discomfort rising again. "I suppose I'll have to plan for that," he answered, the uncertainty evident in his voice. "What do you recommend?" "I'd like this letter to foster dialogue, not serve as a poison pill for my leadership." "You should prepare to engage directly with the skeptics," Amelia suggested. Her tone turned practical, a mentor guiding a novice. "Host a town hall or a follow-up session after this letter goes out, a place for people to voice their concerns without fear of retaliating. Transparency can't be one-sided, you have to be willing to face the critique head-on." As she spoke, each suggestion peeled back layers of his naivete, exposing the nuances of leadership he had avoided confronting. Marcus nodded, taking mental notes. If this letter was to signify more than mere words, it required subsequent actions that projected willingness to listen, to evolve in tandem with his employees rather than from a distance. Determined, he leaned forward slightly, passion igniting in his voice. "You're right. But I also want to ensure this isn't just a corporate event. I want to create an inclusive environment, a sense of belonging within our walls." Amelia's gaze softened, and he could see the subtle shift of hope glimmering in her eyes. "If you want that kind of space, lead with authenticity, but also allow others to lead alongside you. Every voice should be given weight, highlight their stories within your narrative." His mind churned, processing everything Amelia had just shared, an intricate dance between vulnerability and fortitude. What if unveiling his true self could genuinely foster the connection he yearned for? The realization that he didn't just want to salvage the company's image, but also reshape it to reflect a deeper culture of understanding energized him. Yet a new wave of uncertainty rolled in, the nagging worry that such openness could inevitably reveal his insecurities in a stark light, setting him apart from his peers. Marcus felt the tension build around his idea. The moment was palpable, electrifying. He was standing at the precipice of potential transformation. Was he brave enough to leap? Before he could voice his next thought, Amelia's phone buzzed, pulling her back to the reality of the day. "I have to run, but remember, true leadership isn't merely shown through the spotlight, it's often found in the shadows. Be ready to navigate both sides." As he reflected on her words, Marcus struggled to balance the burgeoning resolve with the creeping fear of potential fallout. Each heartbeat sounded like a drum, echoing the stakes he was preparing to wager. Would the choice to confront vulnerability forge a stronger identity among his colleagues, or unravel the fabric that held his leadership together? He didn't have the answers yet, but the letter now felt like a key, one that could unlock conversations he had never dared to embark upon. As he moved toward his desk to finalize the draft, he sensed a storm brewing within. It was time to embody the challenge he had set before himself. Transformation awaited, but would he welcome it or shy away? The air around him felt alive with possibilities, yet a poignant question lingered at the forefront of his mind. Would revealing his vulnerabilities lift him to new heights, or would it merely expose fractures he couldn't mend? Sitting alone in his office, Marcus's gaze shifted to the blank pages of his draft, each page a reminder of the monumental task ahead. The quiet hum of the building wore on him as doubt clung like a thick fog. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, forcing himself to confront the enormity of his decision. The specter of vulnerability loomed, incessantly pulling at his resolve. Laying a hand on the keyboard, he noticed his fingers tremble. Could a simple letter shift the dynamics of the entire organization? His heart raced with the thought of exposing his true self not just to his team, but to the very fabric of the company's culture. Every instinct screamed to hold back, to protect the carefully constructed image of a decisive leader. What if the reaction was overwhelmingly negative? What if his openness was interpreted as a sign of weakness? Yet, something within him whispered that the only way to truly lead was to embrace the discomfort. This was not just about him anymore, it was about the people who walked those halls every day, presenting facades while hiding their fears. A visceral understanding of their struggles forced him to confront his own. It was an urgent call to action. Determined, he began typing, the words flowing with hesitant but purposeful clarity. "Dear team," he started, a tiny surge of adrenaline coursing through him at the thought of sharing his experience of self-doubt and isolation. There was no way to sugarcoat it, he had to reflect genuine moments of his journey, the late nights spent anguishing over tough decisions, the burdens of leadership that often felt overwhelming. His fingertips danced on the keys as he wove in anecdotes of vulnerability, revealing that even at the top, he was not immune to fear. As he composed the letter, he envisioned facilitation, not just expression. He seized on Amelia's advice, addressing the perceived shadows of criticism head-on. He detailed a follow-up town hall, a space not for rebuttal, but for dialogue, an open forum where every voice would matter, where even dissenters could express concerns without reservation. With each paragraph, Marcus began to feel a sense of liberation. He captured not just his thoughts, but dared to highlight stories of his colleagues who had previously shown humility and courage in their own ways. Encouraging them to step forward, to share their triumphs and tribulations, he conveyed a message of collective strengthening. But the growing thrill of possibility soon morphed back into a knot of anxiety. What if they misinterpreted his intentions? Would the culture he'd hoped to nurture fracture under scrutiny? Each minute stretched into an eternity as the letter finally took form. There were moments when he questioned if it would be the beginning of a revolutionary shift or a personal demise. He was treading on unfamiliar ground, oscillating between hope and dread. Finally, with deep resolve, he saved and closed the document. He decided to revitalize his self-doubt positively. He would gather the senior leadership for a last-minute review. It was time to confront possible resistance with the very people who set the tone for the company culture. As he walked out of his office, Marcus's heart raced again. This was uncharted territory. He was not just unveiling a letter, he was disrobing his carefully curated leadership persona. Every step toward the conference room felt monumental, a leap into vulnerability that carried both risk and the potential for profound connection. It was then, just before reaching the door, that a shadow slipped into his mind. An unsettling image from last week's board meeting haunted him. He recalled a dismissive glance from a prominent board member, someone known for their rigid adherence to tradition. Would this same individual seek to undermine his openness? The very thought ignited a spark of determination within him. As he turned the handle, a pivotal realization washed over him. This was more than just a letter, it was the catalyst for redefining not just his leadership, but the entire trajectory of his company. The moment of truth was upon him, yet would he find support or resistance? With the weight of his decision pressing down, he stepped inside the conference room, ready to confront whatever awaited him. The conference room was unusually quiet as Marcus entered, the anticipation palpable, thickening the air. Around the long oak table, he faced the familiar figures of senior leadership, each adorned with expressions blending curiosity, skepticism, and a hint of concern. Their gaze was disconcerting, almost as if the tension was an invisible thread binding him to his past, the past where vulnerability was an avoidable weakness. As he took his place at the head of the table, a rush of memories assaulted him. He recalled early days filled with self-doubt and the painstaking journey of solidifying his position. Yet, standing here now felt different. He wasn't merely occupying the seat of authority, he was wielding the power of transparency that had so far eluded him. "Thank you all for coming," Marcus began, his voice surprisingly steady. "Today, I want to share something personal with you." He could feel their collective attention sharpening. "This is more than just a letter. It's a declaration of vulnerability, a step toward elevating our organizational culture. I believe it's crucial that we acknowledge our imperfections, the fears we bear in silence." The room remained silent, scrutinizing him carefully. He could sense the skepticism coiling among them, trying to gauge whether this was a moment of genuine growth or simply a misguided plea for acceptance. But behind the apprehension lay an intrinsic curiosity: could this really change things? He shared his drafted letter, reading the poignant passages aloud, connecting with the very essence of his team's struggles. With each word, he reinforced the idea of an inclusive dialogue, emphasizing that the success of their initiatives hung on more than just results, it relied on the authenticity of their interactions. When he finished, the silence was deafening. Marcus's heart thudded in his chest, waiting for one of them to break the stillness. Finally, Rebecca, the chief marketing officer, spoke up, her tone measured yet firm. "Marcus, this is quite a shift from how we usually communicate. It's admirable, but do you really think the team is ready for this level of openness?" That question pierced Marcus's resolve. The moment he hoped would seal his transformation was becoming a battleground of doubt. "I believe they need it more than ever," he replied, meeting her gaze evenly. "I've seen too many talented individuals stifle their voices. This is not only about me, it's about creating a space where each of us can put down our armor." Clearly intrigued, David, the CFO, leaned in. "What if this backfires? What if we open the floodgates and drown in issues we're not equipped to handle?" Marcus considered this. It was a valid concern, and one he had wrestled with himself. "That's a risk I'm willing to take," he said, surprising even himself. "But it's not just about vulnerability, it's about building resilience." The discussion intensified. Some leaders voiced their apprehension, others expressed a yearning for the kind of environment Marcus was advocating. Every reaction chipped away at the walls of his own uncertainty. They were not just challenging him, they were exploring the very foundation he aimed to shift. Then, a familiar voice cut through the rest, a calm yet authoritative presence whose opinion held weight across the organization. "Marcus, you have my support. But you need to be prepared for some harsh realities. Not everyone will welcome this change with open arms," the chief operating officer warned, locking eyes with Marcus. Taking a deep breath, Marcus felt a sense of clarity washing over him. The contest of opinions was a reflection, not just of their doubts, but of his evolving leadership identity. No longer was he just the leader, he was becoming the architect of a future built on trust. The room buzzed with a newfound energy, split between skepticism and optimism. But the doubt that initially threatened to drown him transformed into a flicker of hope, propelling him forward. Then, almost defiantly, Marcus posed a question that would resonate beyond the walls of that room. "Are we prepared to be the change agents ourselves?" As the murmurs rose and the leaders considered their responses, Marcus felt a surge of anticipation. His fears had ignited a conversation, and the dialogue was just beginning. The stakes were high, but the rewards could reshape everything they stood for. The moment hung in the air as he realized that even if this journey brought resistance, it was essential. Would they embrace change, or would they retreat back to their comfort zones? The answer lay ahead, and it held the potential to ignite a fire within the organization that they hadn't yet anticipated. But as he looked around the conference table, the tension in the air thickened again, for every moment of progress also concealed the specter of unexpected challenges just waiting to surface. The weeks that followed were a tumultuous journey for Marcus and the leadership team. The letter had been sent to his employees, eliciting mixed reactions that echoed through the company halls. Some embraced it, feeling a wave of relief wash over them as their internal struggles were finally recognized. Others were skeptical, questioning Marcus's motives and the feasibility of the new culture he sought to cultivate. Yet, amidst the noise, a transformation was brewing within Marcus himself. He had expected resistance, but this ongoing dialogue shifted something within him, a palpable sense of purpose that had been long overshadowed by self-doubt. The skepticism voiced by his colleagues was no longer a source of insecurity; instead, it became a platform for deeper conversations. Each town hall meeting he held was a testament to his growth in leadership. Employee stories poured forth, showcasing vulnerability and strength. People stood up to share their own experiences of struggle and triumph, and Marcus listened, absorbing feedback that challenged the very foundations of corporate dynamics. His own experiences resonated deeply with others, but the most profound impact came from those who had once felt invisible. They began to step forth with conviction, encouraged by Marcus's declaration that their voices mattered. As external pressures mounted, media coverage of his leadership style, investors inquiring about the bottom line, and stakeholders grappling with the shift, Marcus stood his ground. He recognized that the essence of leadership lay not only in making decisions that benefited the organization but also in the substantial responsibility to craft an environment where all employees felt seen and valued. The turning point came unexpectedly during a quarterly review meeting with investors. They presented data reflecting early resistance to the cultural shift Marcus had initiated, questioning whether this openness would translate into profitability. The tensions around the boardroom table were palpable, and for a moment, Marcus felt the weight of their scrutinizing gazes. But instead of retreating into defensiveness, a newfound conviction arose within him. "You need to understand," he began, addressing the investors directly. "This is about creating a workforce that thrives on transparency. When employees feel empowered to speak their truth, they invest not just their time but their passion and creativity into their work. The return on this investment is not just on paper, it's the type of innovation and loyalty that can redefine our brand." Marcus's words, tinged with the confidence of someone who had fully embraced his role, shifted the atmosphere in the room. He spoke passionately about the paradigm he was working to create, an ecosystem where people's identities weren't just acknowledged, but celebrated. As he proceeded, faces around the table began to soften, some nodding in acknowledgement of the potential he articulated. Then came the moment of recognition. Investors exchanged glances, and one of them, an older gentleman who had been a staunch critic, leaned forward and spoke. "Marcus, you're onto something. Adapting to this culturally responsive model could set us apart in this industry. But how do we measure success?" Their emerging curiosity marked a pivotal moment. He had taken the conversation beyond mere skepticism, inviting them to consider the longer-term vision of his leadership approach. With transparency shaping strategy, he proposed specific metrics that would gauge employee satisfaction, productivity, and the overall organizational climate. As discussions continued, it became clear that Marcus was not just redefining his own narrative but also transforming perceptions at the highest levels of the organization. By the end of the meeting, he left the room with a renewed sense of accomplishment. He had defended his vision, but more importantly, he pioneered a path toward a future where every individual was empowered to contribute. The subsequent months bore fruit as the changes began taking root. Employee engagement surveys revealed an increase in morale. More teams were collaborating across departments, sharing ideas, and innovating without the fear of judgment that had once stifled creativity. Marcus transformed not just in his role as CEO but as a leader who influenced the corporate landscape. Beyond the financial metrics, the core of his achievement lay in the testimonials of employees rediscovering their purpose at work, inspired by the vulnerability he had shared. Standing at the helm of his company, Marcus felt a profound sense of personal achievement and fulfillment. He had crafted a legacy built not just on results but on the dignity of human experience, a legacy anchored in embracing vulnerabilities, facing fears, and inviting others into a shared narrative of growth. As he reflected, he understood that the price of leadership came not from power, but from the courage to claim an identity that invited honesty and collaboration. Marcus had not only fought for his rightful seat, he had reshaped the table to make room for all voices. And now, as his organization thrived in a culture of openness, he stood fortified in his identity not just as a CEO but as a catalyst for transformation, demonstrating that true success comes from elevating others alongside oneself. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.